Okay, I'd like to bring the April 13th, 2023 meeting of the Architectural Review Board to order. Let's start. We'll start with the approval of our meeting minutes from March 9. Just for the record, note that Steve Law was not present, but he has reviewed. And Steve, can you attest that you reviewed that?
Yeah, Steve Law, Vice Chairman. I did watch the meeting minutes, and I can attest to that.
Thank you, Steve. So you did watch the video, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so are there any questions or comments on the meeting minutes from March 9? Is there a motion?
I make a motion to approve the minutes from the March 9th meeting as written.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Meeting minutes pass unanimously. Our first order of business, 3589 Main Street. Review of petition to zoning commission for a proposed 12-unit apartment building by T&J Realty, Inc. to remove existing multi-use commercial and residential building and replace it with 12 one-bedroom apartments on 2 floors for a total of 7,744 square feet, along with 16 parking spaces. Gentlemen, you have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My name is Nicholas Owen. I have business offices located at 972 East Broadway here in Stratford. I am a developer, and from time to time I do appear before all of your commissions in Stratford seeking approvals for different projects. Tonight I am here in conjunction with the Terry Blake petition, 3589 Main Street. We had submitted previously to Sismitha a number of packages. I'm sure you have them and you've looked through them, and I will have further exhibits to give to you this evening. What I would like to do at this point, before I introduce you to Mr. Tobin, the architect who designed the buildings on this and did the layouts, is to take you back in time a little bit. And I don't think that this commission was authorized or wasn't formed at that point in time in 2015. I could be wrong, but I don't think we had to appear, nor was there an architectural review committee. In 2015, we appeared before the Planning and Zoning Commission, the Zoning Commission specifically, for a very large building that encompassed more than one of the properties that are connected, all owned by the Blake family and all connected. After a number of years and extensions on those approvals, we decided to scrap that development because it was too expensive to build. Now, I know the Zoning Commission and you guys don't really care what it costs to build, but, and I don't say that cavalierly, I say it because it's not part of your purview. But just to reiterate a little bit on that, the structure that we were going over would cause us to encroach on interiors of existing buildings to do a second and third floor, and too much steel involved, too expensive, so we scrapped that project. Along comes Mr. Blake last year and says, look, the building at 38, I always lose this one, 3589, the subject of this petition, that currently sits on this property is one of the oldest buildings in Paradise Green, formerly Blake Travel, Blake Real Estate. There were a number of businesses, and Mr. Blake, Terry Blake's father, was a very dear friend of mine, and at some point during our period of friendship, he expressed interest that at some point he would have to tear the building down because the foundation is deteriorating and the building is really not worth saving at this point. It is obsolete. So our proposal is to tear the existing building down and build something brand new, and by brand new we mean something that fits within that Paradise Green area, walking distance to the train station, walking distance obviously across the street to all kinds of businesses, restaurants, shops, tea houses, and whatever. So there's plenty of business in that area, and we feel that 12 units would be an adjunct to what is already there as far as commercial, and the people that would occupy these apartments would use those facilities across the street in Paradise Green. The proposal is a simple one, and shortly I will ask Mr. Robert Tobin to come up and explain the project to you guys. But what I would like to do at this point is that there was some concern expressed by Sesmitha when we initially filed this plan about what the building looked like. It didn't appear to be totally acceptable to a member or some members of your commission. So what we did is we designed 3 different elevations, and you can pick which one you want, and we feel it fits right in with the neighborhood. Prior to this petition, and I'd like to pass these out, if I could, so you can read through them. Last year, thank you. I'd like to enter those into the record as an exhibit. Last year, we came before the Board of Zoning Appeals, if my memory serves me correct, and the Zoning Commission, and rehabbed a building on the corner of Main Street and Paradise Green Place. Paradise Green Place is the street directly across from the park that exists in the town of Stratford in Paradise Green. And what you can see on that building is we redesigned some of it. We put some new fascias on it, and we put new siding, new windows, and quite honestly, it was rented up by residents long before it was complete. So we anticipated doing a twin building as bookends to the properties that Mr. Blake owns in Paradise Green. Something similar, not exactly, to what's on the corner of Paradise Green Place and Main Street on the other end of the building, which is adjacent to the Cumberland Farms. So with that, I will turn the hearing over to Mr. Tobin, who will explain the project. And I would like to submit a number of plans, if you would pass them out. That way you guys can see the three different proposals. We have included in our proposal a bike rack and a picnic table and a picnic area that I know that your commission likes to see. And we barely have room for them, but we fit them in, and it fits in very nicely. And with that, I'm going to have Mr. Tobin, the architect, take over.
Good evening. My name is Robert Tobin, Robert L. Tobin Architects, and I live at 115 Wigwam Lane in Stratford, Connecticut. When Mr. Blake approached me on the first project, we had a much larger scale of the project, same number of units. It was, as we went through the approvals back in 2016, and we were looking at developing this building and modifying it, adding 2 units to it. We were also going to add 10 units on top of the Alban Center, which is the flat roof structure right next to us. And I had been participated in several projects in that block, in that I had done the mobile station conversion for Mr. Siklis. I was involved with Mr. Siklis on the roof on top of the 7-Eleven. I worked with Terry on the expansion project. I worked with Terry also on the addition, the modifications that were just made to the building on Paradise Green Place. And one of the things we wanted to do was, this project is being submitted as an 830G project, and we are trying, and that way then we can fit this building, get the 12 units that we are proposing, and the number of parking spaces that we've put in. The existing parking is there currently. The back of the property is existing. We're not really doing anything to it, except adding, in the one area, we're removing a parking space to put the picnic area in the back, because that was requested of us. And that does remove a parking space, which creates a problem, maybe create an issue for us. We have provided a bike rack on one of the islands, and the building has been reviewed by Fire Marshal's office, and they have no issues with the size of the building. And as Mr. Owen said, this building is basically going to be a little bit larger and mirror the existing building on Park Place. We're going to match Paradise Green. We're going to match the building finishes, the tan finish that's there now. The windows will match, so it'll be a bookend around the shopping center there. The 12 apartment units are 600 square foot each, so they're not big luxury apartments. And that kind of explains the project. It's a two-story building, no basement, all electric. You know, there's really no exterior mechanicals for the most part. And one of the things that we tried to do was tried to keep the height. I tried to keep the height of the building down so it worked with the 7-Eleven and also worked with the, the bookend on the other side and the residential units over there. That's pretty much, and we're also bringing the building out towards the front street line. And right now there's an area that's open in front of the existing building, and that area congregates a lot of children during the day. It's always a mess. They just come there, they hang out. It's not a place that's conducive for businesses with the kids hanging out. So we're eliminating that public space in front of our building now, and we're going to put in some planters, some low planters, and then plant shrubbery in there, low shrubbery that matches the shrubbery over at the Auburn Center, so that the characteristics of the landscaping of the Auburn Center will be in front of our building. And that's a very simple building, and we're trying to make it match with what's there and blend in with the neighborhood. And the buildings on that side of the street all have the residential buildings and the Sickless building all have peaked roofs, and the 7-Eleven has a peaked roof. So we're trying to keep that character going. We looked at your architectural recommendations for Paradise Green, and they just did not seem to fit on this side of the street. It would be more conducive in a longer street with a longer street frontage, but a single building by itself would seem out of place on that side of the street, in my opinion, and that's why I stayed with I looked at options of bringing those elements into the building, and it just didn't seem to work, and tried to keep that side of the street, the west side of the street, similar in characteristics, and let the east side of the street be what it is, because it's a totally separate animal with the stores and the store frontages that our side of the west side of the street doesn't have. And because we're a residential unit, we're not going to have any big plate glass windows, and we're not going to have we're not going to be having walk-up traffic to our building. And so those recommendations didn't seem like they were appropriate in this case. Any questions?
Okay, thank you. I think we're going to go around the room, and you'll get some commentary. So if you could just stay there, and we're going to start with Tom Sharkowitz. So Tom, I think you have a few comments.
Tom Sharkowitz, member. I think you really answered your own question on to why the design guidelines don't fit your project, or you don't feel like they're appropriate. And it's because, Paradise Green is a commercial center. I know you outlined this building as a residential building, but it's really an outlier. a relic of the past, if you will. So a proposal that is infilling a previous commercial building with a very residentially styled construction, yeah, it doesn't work. This has been a really difficult project for me to review. I live close by to Paradise Green. I wrote those design guidelines. This, as I was reviewing it, I would venture the guess that nobody read the design guidelines.
Well, I'm sorry.
Nobody read the design guidelines.
Well, that's not true.
Okay.
We just, I don't mean to cut you off.
No.
We just didn't feel doing a commercial type facade, a commercial building, when it was gonna be all residential, would fit. It would look like every other building across the street in Paradise Green. And that's not the look we were trying to achieve.
Right, but our design guidelines are what our professional town board feels that is right for the town, not for individual applicants. So I'm going to go through our design guidelines bit by bit. I'm sorry that this is going to take a while, but like I already said, the historical reference to this building is it's not strong, it's not a contributing building, and it lacks architectural finesse. So to try and replicate it, I don't feel is the strongest architectural move you could make. Moving on to massing, it's a large box mass. It's unacceptable. There are no interesting qualities about it. It's flat, it's boxy. It's actually difficult to critique in its current form because I understand that, yes, people will live there. It's a residential building. But it doesn't read as residential, nor does it attempt to be a commercial storefront, which would be necessary for, the downtown commercial district. And this hulking mass is so maxed out that it leaves no room for outdoor placemaking opportunities. I know you said you were going to stick a picnic table in the back. That's the first time I'm hearing of it. A lot of what you're presenting is the first time we're hearing about it, especially with, design options like this. It's not conducive to a good review here if we don't have time to review it. I feel like we're being asked to review things on the fly, which is just impossible. Moving on to building placement, the 3-foot proposed street setback line is unacceptable. It breaks the streetscape plane and encroaches on the pedestrian user experience of the downtown area. And then the placement between two existing buildings, residentially styled, the placement between the two buildings as a residentially styled building, it ensures that all apartments will have a dismal view and limited natural light. The south side is blocked by the Albin Center. The north side overlooks an alley, and the east and west don't get, sun throughout the day. The driveway seemed unsafe to me. It's 12 feet, which I would consider a minimum for a driveway, but also it doesn't allow for dedicated pedestrian access, especially when you don't have access from the rear of your lot to the front of your lot. If you look at the plans, you have a rear entry that only serves the rear apartments. You have a front entry that only serves the front apartments. If I live there and I park in the back, I have to walk on this driveway that is just enough for a car to get through. I wouldn't feel safe doing that at night or on a rainy day or late at night or whatever. I wouldn't feel safe for an old person doing that. Whoever is going to live here, that is not the best layout for this. And I feel like you are maxed out in terms of how much you can squish your building and still maintain a usability that it just doesn't seem practical. The parking lot in the back seems too tight, not enough space to effectively back out of the spaces. I get you angled the spaces to mitigate that, but I mean, I was measuring off the drawings. I got somewhere around 20 feet, which would be, is that what it is?
It's the minimum.
That, yeah, right, that is a very tight parking lot.
And again, it's existing parking lot with no changes being made to it.
Right, but you are demoing an entire building and changing its use. It just seems, you can't have it both ways to me. You can't have an existing half servicing a brand-new half. It doesn't seem like it reads very nicely.
The parking, the width and length of the parking spaces and the fairway between them meets the zoning regulations, although you may not like that, it doesn't meet that aspect of the zoning regulations.
That's true,
I
yes.
take it doesn't conform to what you are really looking for.
I just feel like, you start creating all these squish spaces, it seems impractical.
But we're not creating them, they're there, they're existing.
Right, but they're going to be servicing a new use.
That's correct, the residential use.
Yes.
There is existing residential there now.
How many units?
3 units, I believe, 3 or 4 units?
In the back. 4? Oh, in this one.
There's only one,
There's
sorry.
only one in this building.
So we're going to be ramping that parking lot usage up by 12 times, potentially,
Correct.
if there's only one person living per unit. Moving on to facade, entrance, and roof elements. The large gable roof does not keep with the storefront language of the existing Paradise Green. I know you said that you wanted to keep a gable to match, sort of what was there in the other ones. But all the other commercial buildings have like a mansard roof.
But this is not going to be a commercial building.
But it's in a commercial area.
Absolutely, it's in a commercial area, but this is a residential use. Therefore, we wanted a residential look to it.
And I'm telling you that it does not fit with our guidelines. The window placement I find to be clumsy. It doesn't begin to follow any specific design rhythm. The awning seems applied. The front entrance in plan does not match what you show in elevation. In plan, you have double doors for the front entrance. In elevation, you have a single door.
I have a single door on the plan.
Not what you submitted.
Wait, did you receive the latest plans?
This is the latest plan.
And that has a double door on it?
This has a double door. In fact, it was what was just passed around.
It has a single door? Has a single door.
Right, okay. So there are inconsistencies with what we received versus what is being proposed, which makes it difficult to review.
I said it had a single door.
Right, what we reviewed was a double door.
No, the latest plan has a single door.
What we received was a double door. It's difficult to receive,
No,
conflicting information.
I don't mean to interrupt you. but
That's fine.
I should tell you this. I spoke to Susmitha a number of weeks ago, and she indicated that someone on the commission or everyone on the commission was unhappy with it, and they wanted to see a few more things on the plan.
Yes.
Which we did, and we submitted prior to this hearing.
Right. It's difficult to review things that we've received previous to this meeting. I've had time to review what you submitted before 6:30 p.m., and now we're looking at some things are a little bit different.
They were submitted two or 3 weeks ago.
I have different information.
Okay, so let's put that aside. I do
I-
have the last plan, I'm not sure, the last plan that we actually had emailed to us, actually, which I have right here also, has double door on it. The ones you gave us has double doors, and then the plans you gave us today has single doors. But let's just put that
Right.
aside. We don't need to argue that point. I think there's other things that we
There's
can
other
focus on.
things. The apartment windows at street level are weird. It's not a welcoming environment. I wouldn't want anybody to, have to live there. I feel like it's, as you said before, there are people loitering outside your building, and now you're going to have residences on the ground floor at, eye level. I think you answer your own question.
Well, we eliminated the loitering space.
Right, by encroaching on the pavement 7 feet.
It's within our property. It's not encroaching on the pavement. We are on our property line. We are not encroaching on the town property.
The minimum street lot line building setback is a required 10 feet. The existing is 9.78 feet, I think it says, and your proposed is 3 feet.
Correct. Under 830G, which
Right.
we are allowed to do.
Right. Moving on. There are no mechanicals shown. I don't know if you can speak to that.
All electric?
Hot water heater,
Electric?
air conditioning,
Electric?
electric as in window unit?
No.
Okay, because I don't think window units, especially on the Main Street facade, are going to be acceptable.
They could be fan coil units?
Okay. You show a window in the attic. It's this large attic space. There's no access to the attic.
There's only fire access
Where would that be?
in the hallway on the second floor.
Okay. For the material, color, and surface texture elements, which are you showing? We have yellow and red, and then we have yellow and green.
The,
And then we have, you're going to match
we,
that
our
existing
intention
photo.
always has been to match the existing building on Paradise Place.
But we gave this board the option to choose what color would be suitable for you guys.
There were, I know you read it, the Paradise Green, design lookbook. There were, color palette ideas in there, and I don't feel like any of the proposed options meet that.
Well, a question on your guidelines. They are guidelines. They are not architectural requirements per se.
That's true, they're not zoning documents.
And no, they're not zoning. They're not requirements in any form whatsoever that they must be met. They are guidelines that this board has established as what you would like to see.
Right, so when you disregard all of them in favor of your own opinion,
Well,
you can understand that we have a difficult time reviewing it.
Remember, I did the building up the street, which is the Sickless building, which is a combination, well, it's a commercial building with gabled roofs and I tried to match that building to this building to a certain degree, trying to also match the building on the other side. So that was kind of my guideline because we had no issues with the Sickless building on, are you familiar with that building, the Milford Bank building?
I'm familiar with the building, but that was done prior to this board's creation.
But I was trying to match that concept or that type of facade to this.
In spite of our written design guidelines.
I did something that worked, in my opinion.
I guess that would be your opinion.
As is the guidelines.
Right. Moving on to lighting, we have this email that said, first of all, there's no lighting shown on the building, and that no new lighting will be added. All lighting is existing. How are you adding existing lighting when you're demoing the entire building?
The existing lighting comes off of the adjoining
Well, that's not our recommendations per se, it's code.
Well, we are not, this is not a permit set. It's not a P&Z set. This is a presentation to the Architectural Review Board. There
Right.
are many engineering requirements that have to be met by code, which will be met.
But to leave off entire sections of our design guidelines and tell us that all lighting is existing,
If there are no
That
lights,
doesn't work.
if there are no lights on the building, there are no lights on the building. Right?
no.
Why do I
There
have
needs
put-
to be a lighting per code.
Correct, but I don't have to have lights on the building per se. I could have parking lot lighting. I can have existing lighting, as long as I meet the 15-foot candles on the parking lot and the property, I'm meet the code requirements, correct?
Okay. Well, then moving on. Landscaping, screening, and fencing. You've created it so that there are extremely limited areas for planting, especially considering you're removing the small garden that's existing. In this email response to our document request, it was stated that I don't have any clue as to what the landscaping is, not a landscape architect.
That was the answer, and that is the answer. And there is basically very little or no room at all to add landscaping to the property. And if you tell us that you've been by the property, there is very little landscaping there. There's very little green area in the back. If you want shrubs in the back along the property line, we're happy to do that. You can stipulate to that.
Right, you show entire planters in the front.
That's right, to give us some
What-
type of landscaping in the front of the building to offset the lack of room anywhere else to put landscaping.
Right. So when we want to review landscaping as part of our design guideline review, and you don't give us any, there's the disconnect. You can understand that, right? Also, the chain link fence that's spec'd on the site plan is unacceptable.
It's existing.
It's existing?
Yes.
Okay. Moving on to delivery bays, trash and storage. The unscreened dumpster pad is unacceptable.
That will be screened off per code.
With what?
Well, it's a chain link fence and there's slats in it to block off the view of the dumpster. That's a requirement by the health department.
I'm sure you can understand we don't favor chain link. The slats are a improvement, but we would like to see vinyl or metal, something a little more prestigious, I would understand.
Tom,
Yes.
zoning also doesn't allow chain link.
Thank you, Susmita. The location also seems impractical. I can't imagine, with this site maxed out as it is, with the parking, with, 12 units full of cars, having a dump truck, a garbage truck, access to that dumpster. I know you're going to say it's existing,
It's been servicing it for years.
with 16 cars in the parking lot.
Parking lot did not change. It's been serviced and it's been there and operating for the last 20 years.
I'll have to
We
take,
talked about moving it, but decided based on the past use of it, with the way the shopping centers operated over the years, it didn't make any sense to move it.
okay.
It works.
I'll have to take your word for it. I think I'm going to wrap up my review. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Steve Law?
Yeah, Steve Law, Vice Chairman. Well, I think Commissioner Sarkowitz laid out a pretty thorough response. I have to agree with most or all those comments. You did make a comment about the overall residential nature, architecture of the building, and that was one of my concerns as well. Our guidelines are pretty clear about the street line is one of the big things. It's very clear that keep front building setbacks in relation to the adjacent buildings. So it looks like you're pushing that building out, well, about 6 feet or so beyond the other buildings. That is one of the big things that I noticed that I don't agree with. And again, I think the architecture wants to be maybe a hybrid of architecture, of commercial and residential. I think Mr. Tom Sarkowitz's comments about the residential nature, it looks like a builder's special in a subdivision. It needs to be, I think, more compatible with some of the commercial buildings. Look at the 7-Eleven, that's more commercial. The Alban Center is more commercial. So I think Mr. Tom hit most of those high points. I agree with all of them. A couple of minor questions. Mailboxes, gas meter, is there gas in the building?
No
Oh,
gas,
all electric.
all electric.
I wasn't sure if there's any community area for mailboxes. I mean, if the building were pushed back in alignment with the other buildings, there would be more room in the front for other amenities. You mentioned a picnic table, I guess. I didn't see that. Where in
It's
the...
back against the adjoining property line with the funeral home in the rear.
Okay. Again, I echo all the comments from Commissioner Sarkowitz. You know, the front, the brick, I understand what you're trying to do with the brick water table. I think it's a little weak, though. I think it really should be taller, or it should be a full story high. And I don't know, there's several options here now. We can get into it. But again, we're just seeing this alternate. We hadn't had a chance to review it prior to this, so my only comment is that, you know, the brick base should be taller. I think the entryway should be enhanced with a little bit more of a signifying the entry to the building. Are there any accessibility units or?
Yes, and on the first floor in the rear.
Okay. Like I said, Commissioner Sarkowitz, I think, covered it pretty well. That's all I have for right now, Jamie. Thanks,
Steve. Jamie Millward, Chairman, and look, I'm also going to start out by saying that I agree totally with the things that Tom had to say, and I think that, look, you know, my take on this big picture is that, you know, you needed to move the building forward like that, not so much because of loitering, it was because there's the only way you could get 12 units and cram the parking in the back. So you had every stitch of that piece of property had to be covered with building and parking to get the number of the units that you were commanded to get, I am sure. You know, but don't expect us to stand up here when we're looking at it from a design standpoint and be happy with that, because it's really, look, Mr. Tobin, I mean, you look at this building, I was born and raised in this town, and this will not make me proud to drive down Main Street. And whether you can argue all day long if it's supposed to be residential or it's supposed to be commercial, we can discuss our guidelines. I know what I'm going to feel when I drive down the street, down, you know, one of the most important parts of this town. And, you know, vinyl siding, really, that's what we're going to do. That's the level we're at. And I don't, you know, the other building that you're trying to match, you know, and if that was really the big crux of it, I would say, you know, I know you gave us this little kind of one panoramic and stuck in what the building would look like. And I mean, do we really look at that and say, oh, there we go, there's a nice little addition to the town of Stratford in the heart of our town, you know, and so, you know, I feel like your hands were tied by the dictation of what needed to be put on this property. And I think it, in almost every regard, by our guidelines and by my own perception, forget about the guidelines, of what would be nice in Paradise Green. You know, this is, you know, failed to reach that I can't think of in one way that I would say it was successful in that way. So, you know, we're not going to pick out which one we like best, because I don't think I would pick any of them. I vote for D. And I don't know what D looks like. You know, so I think, you know, the vinyl siding, I'll just point, I want to say on record too that, you know, we have discouraged vinyl siding, and that's, again, our guidelines are opinion, you're right. But here we are in, like, again, a very important part of town, and we're gonna stick vinyl siding in there, and you know, we're gonna mimic a building that is, you know, would not be considered any kind of architectural jewel at, I don't think, under anyone's eyes. So I had a couple, now I've got a lot of paper here, but I was writing some notes down, and I may have covered it. So, you know, like, if the basis of your design was, you know, this second anchor, then there should have been more drawings to prove that point, because my point of showing you this one picture you had, and let's just make sure we're clear, the one thing we have that it even attempts, right, to show what you're talking about is this. But if that was the crux, and if that was the reason why this building looks the way it looks, as opposed to drawing it in a vacuum all by itself, that you would have shown it in context. Because in this, the context is, I guess, what we're trying to show is the little bit, maybe, of the adjoining buildings. So, you know, that was, I think, less than what we would need. You know, the bottom line, you know, is that you're in an impossible situation here, because the size of the building, and then the parking that would be, were required by zoning. I'm not even sure if that would be required in your application, but I think practically speaking, you would want to conform with that part of it regardless, you know, forces this. And it's just, from a design standpoint, it would be a shame and to see this. And by the way, totally not opposed to, you know, necessarily with the use you're proposing here, or the fact that it's affordable, all those things. But, I mean, that's not part of what we're looking at. We're looking at bringing good design to the heart of Stratford. And so, I don't have a whole lot of positive to say. So, I'd be happy, if you'd like to speak any more, that would be fine. But I don't know that any of us have more to say.
We thank you for your comments.
Okay,
one more
so, Tom, would you have a further comment?
Sure.
Go ahead.
The fact that, you know, you waive this 830G law in front of us, we're very cognizant about what that means.
We're not waiving it in front of you. That's what we propose to do.
Well, it was mentioned that our design guidelines do not have to be followed
That's true.
because of it. I think that makes a real mockery of the law.
Oh, no,
To me, it makes a mockery.
Tom, let's not go there.
I respectfully,
may-
I respectfully disagree with you on that.
Well, I would like to point out that this design is so egregious that I wonder if you are okay with this being your architectural legacy in town. You say you work in town, you say you live in town.
Mr. Chairman, we have no further comments. If you would like to close the hearing, we understand where you're coming from. We appreciate your comments. I assume that you're going to give us a letter stating what you would like to see, what you don't like, etc. We accept that, and we will move on.
I appreciate that.
It's
Okay.
starting to get contentious, and it really shouldn't be.
I understand,
Because that's
and
not what we intend.
Honestly, I'm not, look, I said my piece, it's not beneficial to anyone, I agree with you, to be contentious, so that's fine. I think that what we need to do now is come up with recommendations here
Okay?
that are going to be very difficult, and I'm wondering, is there, so Smith, I'm going to ask you a question. Is there, because of the nature of this, is there a precedent to allow us to not have the recommendations tonight? That we can, because this is going to, I feel like to assemble this into something cohesive is going to take more, this is the hard part on a project that is easier to review. You see where I'm going with this?
Yeah. So, because you've submitted some new information tonight, that wasn't like, giving commission members an opportunity to review, and also the fact that there are 2 commission members that are not here, which is not your fault totally, but, even they have not had a chance to review this information. I think it is totally, okay to wait and render a decision, but at the same time, zoning commission, would probably, maybe he can still attend a zoning commission meeting next month, open the public hearing, present their case before zoning, but zoning may actually wait for an ARB recommendation and continue the hearing, if that is okay.
Well, but hang on, can I just interject? Let me just, because maybe I wasn't clear here, and again, that's what I'm looking for procedurally. I wasn't suggesting necessarily that we're waiting to any next meeting. What I was suggesting is, can we as a group, over the next several days or a week, prepare, based upon what we have discussed tonight, prepare our recommendations to follow on. I'm not looking necessarily, I can not like this all day long, but I'm not necessarily looking to hold these guys up. Is that something that we're allowed to do?
No, for 2 reasons. First of all, there is a process here that every applicant follows, and every decision that you give is along that path, and just picking one client and having to spend several weeks would not be kindly looked by the law. Secondly, also, I understand your concerns as designers and professionals, but I also see their side of the story that, there is a need for affordable housing, pressing need for affordable housing throughout the state, and affordable housing is hard to finance. And an 8-30G, by state statute, they're allowed to do that. So it's not like, they're milking the situation, but they picked an application that they wanted to fund, but it is allowed by Connecticut general statutes. So for an affordable housing application, I have sent you some research that Seattle has done on their design review too, and the amount of time and money that is spent in these processes is counterproductive to actually meeting that pressing need of providing affordable housing in a city or a town. So for those 2 reasons, I think having to spend weeks to prepare a recommendation may not be something that is favorable both to the client and to the municipality. We want to be very sure about that too, in this case especially.
I'd like to say a couple of 3 things, if I might. I disagree with Samisa, and we've disagreed before, and we've agreed on a lot of things before. You guys know that you have no regulatory you're not regulated by statute.
No.
You can make recommendations. Some of what Samitha told you is simply not accurate. You can't be appealed. No one can appeal a decision that you make. I don't even believe we can appeal a decision that you make because you're not a regulatory voting body. That's number 1. Before I go into the rest, I would like to say something to you directly, sir. I am not annoyed at what you said, nor do I have any animosity. I understand where you're coming from. We would like to move forward with our 830G application. Our paperwork is all ready to go in. It was pending this hearing. So if you can come up with some, we've taken some notes. Mr. Tobin has taken some notes as to some of the concerns of the commission. We will try to come up with a final set of plans to present to the zoning board. Even though an 830G doesn't have to follow any rules and regulations other than safety, health, and welfare. And we believe that we comply with all of those. However, in trying to make everybody a little bit happy, this commission, us, we are willing to make some of the changes if you come up with some of the recommendations. Some of the things that this gentleman had looked at and would like to see are simply not possible, but there are many of them that are possible. We can, if we have to, redesign what the fascia looks like. We thought we did a pretty good job. We did, in fact, submit those changes in those 3 different elevations a number of weeks ago. Maybe you guys didn't get them. Maybe they got lost in the shuffle. I'm not pointing a finger at anybody. But we thought long and hard of what we wanted to see this building look like. And as I indicated in my initial remarks, we don't want it to look like everything else across the street. That is strictly all commercial, except for second-floor apartments on some of those buildings. With respect to vinyl siding, I'm not sure which commissioner made the comment. It might have been you, or you, the chairman. Everything that you see going up in town is either brick or vinyl siding, and when you're driving down the street with the quality of vinyl siding these days, you cannot tell the difference unless you're 2 feet in front of it. Now, I appeared before this commission probably a couple of months ago on the Barnum Avenue petition, where you guys didn't want vinyl siding, and the zoning commission, when we showed them samples, and I know you've seen this, samples of vinyl siding of what it looks like today, it fits, you can't tell unless you're really, really close. And that vinyl siding is done for 2 purposes. Most importantly, it is done so it's easily maintained. You can wash it every year, every other year. The building looks good, as opposed to painting regular wood siding every 3 or 4 years to make it look good. That is very, very important to landlords and to homeowners.
Can I interject one?
Absolutely,
So one of the things that we request, is physical samples of things. So I understand there's different grades of vinyl siding. There's some really bad vinyl siding, and there's some much. So if you came to us with a color palette and material choices, maybe our action might have been a little different. So short of that, the all-encompassing term vinyl siding, I don't know what that means.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to add something. I was saying something, and, I was being interrupted by Mr. Nico, and I don't know why, it felt like we both are speaking differently. In fact, I was actually supporting the applicant in this case, and when I said about law and, I'm not supporting the design of the project, but the process is what I was supportive of, just to render a decision tonight on making modifications to the design rather than, or having them come back for an extra meeting, but not having to prolong this for weeks and days. The design, it's totally up to this commission to do what you think is the best thing to do for the town. You're tasked with that job. Regarding the appeals and court cases that may come to the town, yes, definitely Architectural Review Board will not be sued. But if Architectural Review Board gave a recommendation or held up the process in such a way that obtaining a zoning commission decision would be difficult, or a denial would result from it, definitely that would trigger a lot of legal issues there. So that's something to be careful about. It's like, you're the beginning here, but this could lead to something else. So I would definitely suggest not to actually take weeks to give a decision. Either give the decision tonight or ask for more information and have the applicant come for the next meeting. They may very well go before the zoning commission as planned for the next month and present their case, and I'm most certain that in this town, the zoning commission values the Architectural Review Board's decision, so they may say to work with the Architectural Review Board, and, in the meantime, if you can give them some comments on how they can revise this, make modifications to this design, maybe they can come back with the materials and the colors and modifications.
Well, okay, I'm in agreement that we are going to come up with our recommendations this evening, and I hear you on that. And I don't want to be, not just because of the law, I don't want to be the one that holds up this process or this project. And I think that I certainly want to have our recommendations prior to them going in front of the zoning commission, because otherwise, you know, the only way we have any voice is if we submit it in time for you know, to be part of the recommendation to zoning. So while I was just suggesting we could do that long before they be in front of zoning, I'm not sure exactly when that is. I understand that it's probably better to do that this evening. And, you know, as far as, you know, I just want to, this is to use this meat a little bit, and I read the things, and I'm familiar with what went on in Seattle, and you know, the problem, and look, I appreciate the position both of you guys are in, and I get the 830G, and like I said to you, I'm in favor of the affordable housing part of this. You know, unfortunately, and I just wish I wish I had a magic wand to figure out an answer to this, but just like with any development, the problem is not that it's an 830G application, or that you have affordable units, or that it's residential. It's that from a development side, you are forced to cover every square inch of your property with building and paving. Right. And so, you know, I don't have an answer to that. That's the unfortunate part. And the repercussion of that is that it leaves you, for a board that's looking at, our purview is design and site planning, and it leaves us with a poor project. So anyway, so let's end this as far as this open discussion, and let's focus on, I think, you know, we can come up with, you know, a kind of a bullet list. You know, I don't think we need to get into micro detail. I'm open to anything, but I think we need some all-encompassing discussion, not discussion points, but, you know, points that we want to make here about the project. So, you know, we're going to have to banter a little back and forth here. You know, Tom, would you like to start with, take a couple of your most critical and key
Yeah, go ahead,
points?
please. Mr. Chairman, before you do that, we'd like to make a couple of comments.
Go ahead.
One of the things you talked about is how compact the site is and how everything is jammed in. I looked at doing less units on the site, but looking at doing that, it really doesn't change the character of the site. If I move it back off the street, back to the 10-foot, as the zoning regulations say, then I cut it back in the parking lot, I picked up 2 parking spaces. That's not a park. That doesn't really do anything for the tenants in the building. The fact that its proximity is near the park, a very beautiful park, it gets utilized a lot, and so people will be able to utilize the park versus it's a semi-urban environment that this is in. It's not a park. It's not a green field that, you know, that's open. It's an infill project, and it's not like we're building, though our building, if we match, by the way, I appreciate your design guidelines. I love them. I just wish they could be incorporated throughout the town. It's just that it's just not impractical in some cases, in which we had to fight against.
It's not practical.
Yeah, they're not practical, but we've had to fight against it. And I haven't, so I appreciate all your comments, and I don't disagree with most of them. And I think what we can do, you know, I can't change the character of the site. It's a small site, it's packed. If I reduce the size of the building, I really don't gain anything. I end up with an eyesore out front because the kids just hang out there. They spray paint the building, they leave their garbage all over the place. It's a maintenance nightmare. My client said to me, we've got to move the building forward and eliminate that space so the kids can't hang out there. And that way, if we eliminate the loitering space, then the apartments on the first floor, I mean, they will be apartments on the first floor, and the people that be renting them are going to know their first ground floor apartments on a semi-urban street. I mean, that's part of can't be helped. We're not going to convert the building to commercial on the first floor because commercial doesn't make any sense. It's going to be a residential project. But can we address, as you said, raise the brick up and up to the first floor, create a more balances a little better, we can do all that.
And you can make that as a recommendation, no disrespect, you could possibly make that as a recommendation in your remarks that you draft up and give to us, along with this gentleman's comments and remarks. And we will try to adhere the best we can to some of them. We would prefer not to come back before the commission again. I think it would be just a waste of time. We can look at your comments, address the ones that we can, and then appear before the zoning board. They will have a copy of your comments, they always do. And then they will say, tough luck, guys, we're not going to approve this. And then it may end up in court because it is an 830G. Or they will make recommendations on their own. Or they will approve it subject to all of your recommendations, which in most cases don't happen. Most of the time, they agree with most of your recommendations. Some of the times with argument, they can see our point of view. Not necessarily all the time, but some of the time. So if you could do it that way, we'll do what we can do.
Okay, that's our plan, is to do it tonight. And it's funny, you know, your argument about that there's a park nearby. I think that's a good argument. But by the way, not every piece of property has to fulfill everything, especially in this location, has to fulfill every part of our guidelines. So, you know, in hindsight, that was a better argument about not having a playground area or a picnic table exactly on your property than anything else you have said. Now, you know, I still will argue about the placement of the building and the rhythm of the building, but that's up for us to kind of, so let's focus on what we need to accomplish here as far as a list of recommendations. So, Tom, if you over, I mean, I have a couple in my head. If you'd like to go first, go ahead.
Hold your thought one more time before you close it on us. Tom made the comment that the width of the driveway going in and out was not acceptable to him. It is acceptable to the fire department, and that's the most important thing. Anyway, look, thank you. And we understand where you're coming from. We hope you understand where we're coming from, and believe me, there's no disrespect at all.
And we live in town also.
And we live in town.
Right. And I would like to say that you're right, there is no animosity.
Absolutely not.
But our board is going to fight tooth and nail for this town.
Absolutely.
That's what we're about. You have presented good projects to us before.
And I have tried hard.
Yeah. And you've been willing to accept some of our recommendations.
Sure.
And I've seen your website. I know you do good work. We didn't see it with this proposal. So I think we are going to try to draft something
Okay.
that seems, obviously it's going to be what we want, but in regards to this 830G.
I mean, all your comments are valid comments. It's a matter of being able to blend them in a cost-effective manner on a tight site that's restricted within the, you know, the development project that we have to put together. Because we have our client as you have us as your client, so to speak.
Thank you, guys, for your time. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, so Tom, would you like to start?
Yes.
Let's throw out a couple ideas here, and then we'll...
Okay, is this going to be more of a working session? Okay.
A little bit, yes.
Okay. So, first and foremost, the biggest part to me is that it can't encroach anymore on the street lot setback.
Agreed.
That's
We
would be
should
my
fight-
number
I think
one.
there's-
Tooth and nail for that.
I think there's room to reduce some of the unit, we don't do interiors, but they've shown us it. There's room to reduce one bedrooms to maybe studios to mitigate something like that. I think that is an understandable recommendation. The next one that's super important to me is the gable roof. It was discussed that there is nothing in the attic, there is no use for the attic. Therefore, I think it could be a cornice with it doesn't even have to be a flat roof, it can be a sloped, one-sided gable back towards the parking lot, hidden by a cornice. That would keep, you know, the residential aspect of the building with the commercial neighborhood. And then the windows, I would like to see them not mold units. I would rather see them, you know, rhythmically spaced and
I'm sorry, Tom, say that again? Not mold?
not mold units.
Separated, yeah.
Separate individual units. It looks like there's room for 5 to do 5 nicely spaced windows.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Those are going to be my considering.
Yeah.
leave before you render a decision?
It's, yes.
Hearing is still continuing.
Yes,
It's not an administrative session. This is not planning.
yes.
Yeah, but I think in this process, they came for your decision. You have to give them a vote, and then they have to leave.
But nobody likes anything they offered, so we don't have anything good to say. That's the difficult part for me.
going to open my thing up, and I'll say, is there a motion to accept those recommendations as outlined by Tom?
Steve Law, Vice Chairman, I'll make a motion to accept the recommendation comments as recorded by Commissioner Sarkowitz.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say
Aye.
aye. Aye. Passes unanimously. Okay, so there you go, one other piece of business I do want to get to. So Tom, we're not going to try and do the discussion of how our meetings are working tonight, because it's late and I think we've done a lot. But I would, of course, I'm not putting my hands on it. Smitha, I didn't share with you because you thought it would be best not to come from you, but Steve and I have crafted a letter that I shared. John's not here, Shannon's not here. I don't want to get into like how I write or even if you think there's an egregious error in how a word was used, but did the overall flavor of what we're trying to get at, are you satisfied that what we came up with is acceptable?
Yes. I understand your intent in it.
Steve, any further thoughts on, because I'd like to get this out, honestly. And although, it's funny, when I talked to Shannon this afternoon, she said she had some comments on the letter, which I have not seen. She said she was going to email them to me, and I did not see that. And I printed this stupid letter out, and it's in this pile somewhere. And I don't know where, because Smitha, I don't know if you want to see this letter ahead of time with no here it is, with no comment, but
I can see it with no comments, but I wouldn't comment on it.
no comment. Yeah, and look, if you think it's horrendous, you can just, call me at home or something, I don't think you're going to think it's horrendous. I think we went back and forth on a little bit, and so I'd like to get that out and maybe kind of get that ball rolling. And then is it looking like we're having anything on the agenda next month yet?
Not yet, and I also wanted to add, like, we'll be doing the zoning regulation amendments, interviews with the consultant. One of the consultants had a very interesting idea on how we can codify ARB within the zoning regs itself and, make ARB part of the zoning process, so it is not like an optional step or something that, a check off to do something else, and that would give more meat to ARB. I thought it was a very interesting idea, and I'm telling you because I saw this.
I'd like to see specifically how that might work, but it seems like, I think anything that would allow us a little more oomph, right, and say in what we're doing here is.
I'm going to read it when I go back to
Yeah,
work.
you don't have to do it now. All right, is there any other business to discuss? And if not, is there, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, meeting adjourned. Thanks, everybody.